This is A Geek Leader. Hey, Geek Leaders. Welcome to episode 127 of A Geek Leader podcast. And I just got back from a trip with the family. We drove from our location, which is near Charlotte, North Carolina, up to Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. And we took our new electric vehicle, and this is the first time we took a road trip with our Tesla, and we're a little bit nervous about charging, and we had just this fear inside of us that was kind of like, well, some people call it range anxiety. Are you going to have enough power to get there? Are you going to find charging stations when you're there? And we did all the research ahead of time to look for where the superchargers were, and if there are any free chargers around, could we plug in at the cabin we were staying? I kind of did all that research, and we were still super nervous about it, even though everything seemed to be fine. Other people had said that they had no problem. We knew where some free chargers were, and we still had this ungrounded fear. And until we drove up there, stopped at the supercharger, charged in Asheville, and then went the rest of the way, and got to our cabin with plenty of battery life left, more than 50%, and we're able to plug into the cabin and get 10 or 15% every night. And then we took in a Hatfield McCoy dinner show, and there was a free charger there, and charged off. It was great. We had nothing to worry about, and it's kind of funny to look back on it and say, why were we so afraid? Why were we so nervous? And when I think about it, it was mostly because we've never done it before. And a lot of people are afraid of things that they've never done before. And that fear shows, people at work were like, oh, are you nervous about your trip with your car? I'm like, yeah, I actually am. And the more I talked about it, the more nervous I got, thinking about all the different things that could go wrong. What if there's heavy traffic? What if the maps don't take into account that we're going up into the mountains, and going up the incline is going to use more power? What if this? What if that? All these what ifs that would probably never happen anyway. And I had to go back and think, I've had many episodes in the past where we've mentioned fear and talked about fear. And even a couple of years ago, I had a full-blown episode just about how to overcome anxiety and fear, and then talked about being brave with leadership. So I decided to create a new episode today where I talk about fear, anxiety, and how to be brave, how to lead with confidence. But if you are in the market for a Tesla, you can head over to geekleader.com/Tesla, and that will redirect you to my affiliate link, and you get 1,000 free supercharger miles if you buy a Tesla Model 3, or if you get a Model X or S. This is a limited time offer, but you will have free unlimited supercharging. So definitely check that out. And if you want to read more about Tesla, you can always go over to geekleader.com and click on the sponsors and affiliates tab and kind of see more about some of the items that I use and affiliates for the show. And Tesla's one of those. Definitely love our Model X. It's been fantastic. And you can get a discount if you are in the market of that. But just to let you know, the fear thing, it was kind of one of those things that was outside of work. It was about our car, about how we get there. And once we did it, we realized how stupid it was to have that fear. And the same thing holds over when you're at work. So, like I said, I wanted to talk more about that, leading with confidence and overcoming that fear. So I want to dive into that right now. But whenever you are a leader, being a leader actually kind of demands you to be brave. You have to be brave sometimes because you're driving the strategic vision of your company or your business or your team forward, and sometimes you don't know where you're going, and the rest of the team doesn't know where you're going either. And if you go in there and you're always, have no confidence, you're acting like you're nervous if this isn't going to work, well, that's going to show through, and that's going to affect everyone else on your team, and they're not going to have confidence, and they're not going to think it's going to work. And Henry Ford had a great quote that said, if you think it will or you think it won't, you're right. So if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And when it comes to a project or a strategic vision for your team, if you go in there and your team doesn't believe it's going to work, it's not going to work. They're going to find some way for it not to work. So you need to live or at least appear that you have confidence in the decisions that you're making and moving forward as a leader. So when I think about fear, one of the acronyms I've read about fear was that it's false evidence appearing real. And most of our fears never happen. There are things that you have all these troubles that never come true, right? And it's kind of amazing that we have two different types of fear. And I want to talk about those two different types. We have healthy fears and unhealthy fears. And a healthy fear would be like my fear of snakes, or the fear that I want to instill in my son not to run out into traffic, right? Those are some healthy fears. But then you have unhealthy fears. So what you need to do is figure out how to diagnose which fear is healthy and which fear is not healthy. So whenever I think about how to overcome fears, I want to play it out. I want to think about what is the worst thing that can happen. So when I was thinking, go back to the car example, right? If we ran out of battery, what's the worst that will happen? Well, we've already mapped it up. We know we're going to get there with plenty of battery left, so we're not going to run out on the road. But if for some reason we did, could always get a tow truck, get a rental car. Yeah, it'll ruin probably half a day at most, and we'll be back to where we were on the trip and having a good time. And it's something that we'll laugh at and make fun of in the future. Then think about what's the likelihood of that happening. Well, it's pretty slim because all these people have said that Tesla's mapping and how much battery you'll have when you arrive at your destination is pretty darn accurate. And even if it would have to be off like 30%, and with a 300 and plus mile range, you're talking it has to be off 100 miles, and it's just not gonna. I don't think it's gonna be that far off for us to run out of charge on the way there. And if we couldn't charge at the supercharger, well, that was a destination charger, not too far. Well, yeah, instead of it being 15 minutes to charge and top off, it may be an hour, okay, or 2 hours. Okay, well, that's fine. Kids have iPads. We have things we can do. It'll be all right. And then how can you reduce the likelihood of this happening? So we've already discovered that the worst that'll happen is not too bad. The likelihood of it happening is pretty slim. And what can I do to reduce that likelihood of it happening? Well, one of the things that we did is instead of, we typically keep our car around 80% charge whenever we charge at the house. Before the trip, we bumped it up to 100%. So we left at 100% instead of 80%. So that gives us a little buffer. All right, an extra 20% buffer just in case. We also had mapped out ahead of time other chargers in case that the supercharger was broken or didn't work or that was in the area. So we knew where to go, and we would feel a little bit more confident if the worst seemed to happen. And then the last one is, if the worst happens, how can you recover? And I kind of already mentioned that in this example, if the worst happens, then we can get a rental car and get a tow truck and move on, right? So that's one of the things that you can do to overcome fear. But one of the other things that helps me when I realize that I'm afraid about something is I realize that everyone else is afraid too, right? We all deal with fear. Everybody has a fear of something. And it's important to understand that sometimes the difference between really successful people and unsuccessful people is how they handle that fear. And even though a successful person has a fear of that something may not work out, and they realize that it's an unhealthy fear, and then they do it anyway. They do it in spite of the fear. And sometimes they do it because they have that fear. Some people enjoy that fear. Now, I'm not one of those people that enjoys the fear. I don't enjoy the adrenaline rush or anything like that. But I have discovered that I can, do it anyway, even if I'm afraid of how this is going to come off. I mean, this podcast is an example. I was afraid of starting this podcast because people might think I'm stupid. People might not like it. People might tell me that I'm obviously not a good leader because of the stuff that I share on this podcast, so therefore I shouldn't be in my role and maybe I'll get fired. There's this whole, group of unfounded, unhealthy fears that come up whenever you think about something like this. And in reality, it's all, nonsense to come up, to think about these kind of things. So you have to realize that you just have to put that fear aside. And move past it, and you have to be brave. And sometimes you need help to be brave, and you need people around you. And we talked about that in the last episode about how surrounding yourself with a team of people could benefit you, such as having a mastermind or a like-minded small group that encourages you to move forward. And that's why I also want to encourage people to go to techleaders.group, HTTPS techleaders.group. And there's a little small short form just where you put in your name and your email address if you're interested in potentially becoming part of a small group of leaders, like-minded technical leaders that will share, help each other, hold each other accountable, and grow together. And I want to be part of that group. And I've already had some people sign up, and what I want to do is get a few more people in there, and we'll figure out how we're going to start this. I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know what's going to work out, but we'll give it a try. And so head on over to techleaders.group, or you can go to geekleader.com and click on the link there to go to Tech Leaders. Just put your name and email address in, and I'll get back to you. We'll go through the details and figure out how this thing is going to work in the next couple of weeks. All right, so I've been focused on leadership now for many, many years, sometimes too much. And I've seen countless people that have great potential to be fantastic leaders. But for some reason, they never stepped out and gave it a shot. They never wanted to take the lead, take the initiative. And a big part of that is because of fear. They weren't brave. They didn't have the ability to, or it wasn't that they didn't have the ability. They didn't have the I don't know what it was. They didn't have the bravery to move forward. And they didn't realize that there's healthy and unhealthy fears like I've been talking about. And sometimes it's important to go through how to be brave in order to lead with confidence and move forward. There's some very practical things, like if you're going to a meeting, I found that if I just walk about 10% faster than my normal gait to that meeting, I arrive with more confidence. I have no idea why. I don't know. I heard someone give me that tip that if you just walk a little bit faster, you'll seem more confident, and that may make you more confident. And it works for me. Maybe it'll work for you. Maybe not. I don't know. But here's some things that I want to break down. The word brave. BRAVE, and use an acronym here. And you can see this on the website at geekleader.com/brave. And first one is breathe. Breathe. A few years ago, I was at TEDx Charlotte, which is, the TED Talk events, and I heard this guy named Jonathan Wynn. He told a story about the power of a breath, and it was a really good video. I'll link that up in the show notes as well. But in that talk, he talked about how, when he was born, he was struggling to live, and they gave him a breath, and now he coaches people on breathing. But one of the things you can do whenever you're nervous, whenever you have fear, just breathe. Take a deep breath. Whenever I'm nervous, just take a deep breath. The inhale of oxygen does something to your body to where it slows you down just a second. Just take a second and breathe. Calm yourself down if you are super nervous and you want to be brave. The next one is reason with yourself about why you are afraid. Remember, play it out. Figure out why you are afraid. Is it a healthy fear? Is it an unhealthy fear? Is it an imposter syndrome? And I've talked about the imposter syndrome so many times in the past. And, when I go back and think about my first time ever teaching a class, I had this huge, ridiculous fear that I wasn't qualified to teach this class. The students are going to find me out. Someone's going to write an article about how terrible I am, put it in the paper, and then my boss will read it, and he'll realize that I'm not as smart as I said I was and as smart as he thought I was, and I would get fired from my normal job, and all these things went through my head that are just absolutely ridiculous. And all those fears have no justification whatsoever. And so once I do that and I reason with it and I think it through, I realize that it's never going to happen, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. So after you've breathed, you took your breath, you reason through why you're afraid, then accept it. Accept the fact that, I'm afraid of this. Okay? Why am I afraid? I just know I'm afraid. Let me figure it out. And whenever you accept the fear, now you can move forward. Now you can play it out. Now you can see what really happens. Now you can see what the worst thing that could possibly happen would be, why it's there, how you would move forward, and then get yourself back on track. Then after you've accepted the fact that yes, you have fears, you know what the worst thing is that could possibly happen, you know what you're afraid of, then visualize it all going right. Visualize that you've overcome this fear and you're no longer afraid. And I know that sounds kind of woo-woo and foo-foo of visualizing something, but I find personally that it helps when I visualize myself going through something that I don't like to do. I've said before that I struggle sometimes with empathy, so I'll spend time visualizing that I am in that person's shoes, walking their daily walk. I visualize that I'm in their car driving to work that day before I have a one-on-one with someone, so I know what they're kind of going through, or at least I pretend that I know what they're going through. I try to visualize that, and I think if you visualize your win, visualize overcoming the fears, visualize that you're not afraid anymore and you're moving through it, it helps you be more brave as you get there. And then the last thing is just to execute. You got to execute. Ideas are crap. Execution is everything. Everybody has ideas. Everybody has things that they want to do or desires to do. Everybody has something that they wish they had done, but just do it. Just try it. Just give it a shot. And this podcast is one prime example of me trying to execute. And it may not be the best execution, but it is an execution. And if you think back on it, anybody that's been listening to the show for the long haul, we're at 127 episodes now, which is fantastic. It's crazy. It's crazy for me to think about that. I've been doing this for 3 years, and we've had over 200,000 downloads. It's ridiculous for me to comprehend that this show is moving in that direction, which is awesome. But if you just breathe, reason, accept your risk, visualize the win, and then execute on that win. Do it anyway. That's how you be brave. That's how you lead with confidence. That's how you move your team forward. And that's how you overcome those fears and those anxieties, those uncertainties of making a decision or leading a team or stepping out. Maybe it's your first time leading. Maybe it's your first time stepping out. Well, sometimes you might need a mentor. You might need some help. So I do encourage you all to go over to techleaders.group and check that out. And if you're interested, sign up, and I'll get back in touch with you. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope it helped you out. If it did, please head over to Apple Podcasts. Leave me a rating and review, and maybe I'll read it on the show. It'd be awesome. Thanks so much.